In the Indian subcontinent, people generally do not drink a lot. But while I had an opportunity to go to the USA, I saw people consuming it almost every day. And it has to do a lot with two factors. First is geography, and the second is society. A few days ago, I went to an office party with my colleagues. So it was a restaurant owned by Surya Kumar Yadav. When I was in Bangalore, we used to go have office parties every weekend. We would go to restaurants, have nice food and drinks and everything. So in my first job, it was very surprising to me, and it was also sort of intimidating when you're going out for the first time, ordering drinks for yourself. The one thing that I always had in my mind was growing up, I watched a lot of movies, and in those movies, getting drunk or getting high was always portrayed in a bad light. And even in general Indian society, having drinks or drinking alcohol, consuming alcohol is considered a taboo. So why is that? That in the big picture or in our general daily life, something is considered bad, but it is still practiced at such a big rate. Like I live near GTB Nagar, and there are a lot of clubs and restaurants which serve alcohol. Last year, the ruling party also brought a bill regarding change in policy of alcohol distribution. There was a huge political drama around it, and we have historical figures like Mahatma Gandhi, who was very vocal about non-consumption of alcohol. And even as of now, Gujarat, his birthplace, is still a dry state. Even in states like Bihar, there was a full prohibition on alcohol. Why, as a society, are we still drinking alcohol if it's so bad for you? While growing up, in my close circle or in my close relatives, there were no heavy drinkers. And even in my distant relatives or friends, if someone was consuming alcohol, it was not considered to be a very good thing and straight up looked down upon, which for me was very normal. So when I moved to Bangalore, I had a very hard time accepting this. And also I've seen that in marriage functions or in some big event, there used to be a crowd sitting together, generally older uncles. They would sit around on a table and have drinks. And since it's also shown in the movies that once you consume alcohol, you are very dizzy. And generally people start fighting after having a couple of drinks. So I had a sort of uneasy feeling when I saw such a group, and maybe I think someone's going to start a fight. And after seeing that a couple of times at different functions, I thought it's a very common thing to do. And since all those people who were sitting around the table, they were friends, they were having a good time. So maybe I thought maybe it's more of a bonding routine than anything else. But still, I kept wondering that is alcohol bad for me? Because according to the World Health Organization, roughly 2.5 million died from alcohol or alcohol-related incidents in just 2024. So it can't be that good for you because as humans, we invest a lot of energy in developing our prefrontal cortex. It's a part of your brain which makes you a human. And nature had to invest a lot of resources to create. And consuming alcohol really impacts the prefrontal cortex. It sort of shuts it down. On the contrary, you have a species who have invested so much in developing an organ, and on the same hand, the same species is consuming something which sort of destroys it. So what's the purpose of that? Because if you ask me that why do I think people drink, I think people drink to sort of reduce their social anxiety, or it is easier for them to reach a flow state where they are more confident or when they do not hesitate a lot, and that has to do with our prefrontal cortex. Alcohol sort of numbs that feeling down. But again, drinking is something which is sort of celebrated. If you think about it, there are other narcotics as well. Like you have smoking. So why is that one activity is not sort of practiced so much, while the other is considered to be a social bonding experience? And even though I understand that both of these activities, and there is no sort of less harmful of these two activities, so I was reading about it and I came across this book which I found very interesting called Drunk, book by Edward Slingerland. Talks a lot about the origin of drinking, or how as a human race we started doing, and how different species get high. So in the book he talks about the source of alcohol, or the source of this beverage. And since I've studied chemistry, so alcohol is nothing but ethanol, and it's an organic compound. So alcohol is something which is created by the yeast, and there's also another product which is similar to it. It's called methanol, but it's extremely poisonous, and some consumption of methanol is very lethal. So what happens is that there is a ongoing war between two kingdoms. First is the fungi kingdom, or which the yeast belongs to, and the second is the bacterial group. So when a fruit falls off the tree, the yeast will digest the sugar and produce ethanol. And ethanol has two basic functions right now. First is it is very harmful to bacterial growth. It will rupture the cell wall and sort of acts as an antibacterial solution. And a lot of you may know this, that when the COVID epidemic happened, we were advised to sort of clean our hands with disinfectants and hand sanitizers. And a hand sanitizer is nothing but a 70% solution of ethanol. And ethanol is very volatile also. It will form vapors and spread in a larger area. So when the yeast produces ethanol, it eliminated the competition, the bacteria. And then secondly, it also started diffusing into the atmosphere, produces a signal for other primates or other creature or other animals that there is a ripened fruit and it is ready to consume. So our early ancestors used this information and they associated a particular smell with a ripened fruit. And it is very important because at those time to survive was the most important thing. So it was very essential to find food this way. The second thing that happened was, since a lot of these fruits had starch, had sugar, and when they decompose, they produces ethanol. So going forward, as humankind developed, roughly 10 to 20,000 years ago, we were still hunter gatherers, but there was evidence, which was mentioned in the book also. We were consuming a very light form of alcohol, which was created from fruits and barley and everything. But that was not very strong, not like what we have today. As civilization grew in the Neolithic time period, people also started farming, and with the surplus of wheat, over time, they realized that this excess grain can be used to produce ethanol. And to be honest, producing alcohol at that time was actually very beneficial for us as a species, because drinking water was not clean at that, and there were a lot of pathogens in the water. And since that was in prehistoric times, boiling water to clean it was not feasible for everyone. So what they did was use this excess alcohol as a disinfectant, and they mix it in water to sort of purify it. Because while fermentation process is occurring, yeast is fermenting and producing alcohol, it is killing of bacteria and making the solution sterilized. So it was sort of the first water presumption method also. The second thing was the calorie intake. So in those times, high calorific value food such as meat was not very easily available. So to make up our daily calorie intake, people used to drink alcohol also, because beers and wines were very high calorific value fruit. Because ultimately, when people realize that they can use excess grains to produce alcohol, that sort of motivated them to produce more. The agricultural revolution happened in that area. The second thing was, even though these drinks are very harmful for us, because humans are the only species which are deliberately poisoning themselves, and there are a lot of things which we humans are not sort of accustomed to, such as some people are lactose intolerant, they are not able to digest milk, and that gives them diarrhea and stomach issues, which is not good for our survival. But the same can't be said about alcohol, because the high that the alcohol produces in our body, that is still not fixed. So why is that the case? So while I was thinking about it, I realized that a lot of the strong drinks or the hard liquors that we consume in our daily lives, like vodka, whiskey, and everything, these are a separate category of drinks. Alcohol beverages have two categories. First is fermented, and the second is non-fermented or distilled drinks. In the fermented drinks, we've talked about beers, wines, and which have a very low alcohol content. On distilled alcoholic beverages, the alcoholic content is very high. And in somewhere in China, in the 15th century, distillation was used to filter out pure alcohol from fermented drinks, and for a human body to evolve around that. Some 500 years is not such a very long time. And as a species, we require hundreds of centuries to develop and sort of be able to mitigate the effects of alcohol on our brain. But, and I was also thinking that in the Indian subcontinent, people generally do not drink a lot. But while I had an opportunity to go to the US, I saw people consuming it almost every day. So why is that the case? And it has to do a lot with two factors. First is geography, and the second is society. On the geographical aspect, the Indian subcontinent is very close to the equator and has a moderate and humid temperature. Due to that, when the early Indians were trying to create fermented drinks, they would have realized that it is getting spoiled very easily because of the humidity and everything. The alcoholic beverages were not very easily available, or they were using a lot of resources. The second thing that came into my mind was how in our society, particularly in our religions, alcohol is not considered to be a good thing. In our mythology, we have heard about Somras, or we have heard about Madirapan, and that is not something which is seen in a positive light. And it is not used in any worship or ritual, like how it is done in the Western countries. In the West, since it had a colder environment, so people realized that their first the fermented drink was not getting spoiled very easily. And also in those colder climates, while we are consuming alcohol, our body is producing acetaldehyde, which is very poisonous, and it has a lot of side effects like nausea, facial flushing, a rapid heart rate, and it brings an alcohol flush reaction, which sort of heats up the body, which we did not require because we were living in a humid climate. Yeah, so that is what I think about why people drink, but I'm not sure in which direction that is going. Is the alcohol consumption increasing or decreasing in today's youth? Because I read an article that the newer generation are drinking very less than the previous generation.